You want us all to stand up?
You can just get around one table. Yeah. So,
COVID times.
yeah. You're far from. Okay. I'll count three. And then
Wait, I forgot what I was supposed to say.
we are CODAH, join CODAH is action.
I got that.
We are
Well,
CODAH.
submit.
Okay. 3, 2, go.
We are joining
Perfect. Thank you so much. Thank you very much.
Outstanding.
Thank you. All right. Have a nice day.
Thank you. Distance has been done. You will submit. Thank you. So, in a change to the published program, unfortunately, Anna Maria has to leave us really quickly. So she's just got enough time to do this. So I am going to switch over to Anna Maria. We've got the screener. Anna, you're there, right? Take yourself off mute.
Can you hear me?
Can hear you now, yeah. So Anna Maria is going to be presenting on technological breakdown issues from digital heritage. Anna Maria is a former colleague of ours in the media and communication department, who's only just recently escaped to the University of Greenwich, where Anna's now a associate professor in digital culture. Anna?
Higher education learning, but that's a whole other story.
Oh, okay, I'm going to ask you about that technically, because that sounds like a scam to me. So, when you're ready, Anna, you can start.
Okay, hi everyone. Thank you, Leighton, for including me today in what I think is a very topical discussion. Sorry I can't be there in person. I would have loved to. Yeah, I wasn't able to make it out today, but I will be at the Markham Castle workshop for those of you that will be attending that workshop. And I'll be talking a bit about some of the studies that I'll be mentioning today at that session as well. So if you'd like to talk to me, definitely come and see me. I think the workshop is June 8th and 9th. So hopefully I'll see you there. Now, today, I'll be presenting my provocation on technological breakdown, and I will approach it from the digital heritage space, as Leighton indicated. Now, if you didn't start worrying about technological breakdown after Dion Curry's blockchain presentation, perhaps this presentation will add to the concern we should all have about our increasing digital culture. So just to set the stage, here's a bit about my research background. For the last 12 years or so, I've been researching the social, cultural, and political implications of the development and use of apps through the prism of the heritage sector. And I've explored this in two ways: through empirical studies of augmented reality apps made by significant museums, and by creating my own apps that display women's art. And on the bottom right-hand side of the slide, you can see two icons that represent two of the apps that I've released in the past. And as some of you will know, I've more recently created an app on Welsh artist Gwen John. Hopefully some of you have downloaded it already. So it's safe to say that I've been thinking about apps and their implications for a long time. But today I'm going to focus on one augmented reality app study that I did several years ago, which is central to my recent book called Reconfiguring the Museum, The Politics of Digital Display, which came out just this year. And as you can see, I will also take every chance I can to also promote my new book. In my book, I examined the augmented reality app pictured on the cover from different perspectives, including how it was remade, how it participated in reclassifying and rescripting things, the part it played in reordering and rewriting city spaces, and of course, as in the title, what its politics were. So to set the stage for my provocation on technological breakdown, I want to first take you on a short journey through aspects of this book and its case study. And I will start by painting a picture of how the app worked in practice. So here's how the augmented reality app I studied looked when one first downloaded from the App Store and opened it. It was called the Montreal Urban Museum app, or the MUM app for short, and it was the first of its kind in the Canadian museum sector, but not the first in the world. Because actually this app was first made as the Street Museum app for the Museum of London here in the UK, and then remade a year later for the McCord Museum in Montreal, Canada. Now there's a point here related to the stabilization of technical designs, but I will park that for a moment and perhaps leave it for another day. So the MUM app served basically as a museum exhibit display that showed about 141 historical photographic images from the McCord Museum's Notman photographic archives. And what was so innovative about the MUM app was that it displayed those historical images across the city of Montreal. And to do so, it used an integrated GPS-driven map to indicate locations where augmented reality superimpositions would occur. And so by holding up the mobile device in particular locations of the city, the MUM app would superimpose historical photographs onto city views using the camera of the device, as well as a number of sensors. And the point was to see how places used to look historically in situ. Now, as I will explain in a moment, augmented reality apps are an interesting case study for technological breakdown. That's because while we think of them as just tiny applications that sit on our mobile devices, they are actually embedded in extensive infrastructures. But before I get to that point, I want to just briefly explain the theoretical frames I used, which are important to understanding some of the points I will make. So my theoretical framework involved a number of different fields of study, including science and technology studies, infrastructure studies, media studies, and also spatial studies. But perhaps most importantly, I used actor network theory, or ANT, which will likely sound like an obscure theory to everyone except for maybe Leighton. But ANT is quite important to studies of infrastructure agency and, as will become clear, technological breakdown, because it suggests that we must understand agency or action as occurring through networks or assemblages of actors that are always made up of both humans and non-humans. And hopefully that will be made clear in my example today. And for this case study, I followed a number of participants invited to use the app around the city of Montreal, and I both observed them and filmed them. Now, let me get back to the point that I made earlier, which is that augmented reality apps are an interesting case study for technological breakdown. This is so because while we may think of apps as just tiny applications that sit on our mobile phones, they are actually embedded in extensive infrastructures. Most obviously, they rely on things like mobile phones and their sensor technologies, but they also rely on telecommunication services that include data plans, radio towers, and kilometers of wires, GPS systems that include signals and satellites in space, big data that is captured, stored, communicated, and analyzed, and also big corporations like Apple and hydro companies, to name a few. So when so many actors, infrastructures, and networks are needed to make a tiny app work, you can already begin to imagine how the risk of technological breakdown becomes not only a possibility, but also a frequent occurrence, and some would say a sure thing. But the fact that augmented reality apps are embedded in complex networks of actors and vast infrastructures is not the only problem as to why technological breakdown might be more prevalent. The other problem is that when these networks of actors and vast infrastructures are linked together, agency is redistributed in sometimes unexpected ways. So to help explain that point, if I were to ask you to look at this picture and say to you, what do you see? You might say, well, it's a guy holding a mobile phone and looking at a historical image of a building. But what I see is the redistribution of tasks associated with museum exhibitionary practices across networks of actors and vast infrastructures. And using this augmented reality app, tasks that were normally done by non-humans like museum displays and lighting in exhibition space, as well as humans like curators that place artifacts in displays just so, are now displaced across unexpected actors. So for example, the placement of each historical photograph in augmented reality, which is normally done in an exhibition space by a curator who places it in a physical display, is now done by a network of actors and vast infrastructures that include the app's code, the mobile phone sensors, satellites in space, and radio towers, to just name a few. And this redistribution of agency across humans and non-humans is done indiscriminately, and perhaps more perplexingly, it's done often unbeknownst to the makers of apps. And it was exemplified in the many technological breakdowns that occurred when the MUM app was used in my participant study. So for example, there were screen exit buttons that went missing. There were camera shutters that did not open. There were flickering pins on maps and location indicators like the blue dot in the wrong places. There were also historical photographic images that would just not superimpose correctly and would sometimes intersect with each other, like in this instance shown on the slide. These are just a few examples of the technological problems experienced by participants and myself. And the problem was not only that technological breakdown was more likely in this exhibit, but also that it became harder to diagnose where the technological breakdown had occurred within the complex network of actors and infrastructures involved. So for these and other reasons, I found apps to be experimental, not in and of themselves necessarily, but rather every single time they were used, since one could never be quite sure if all the networked actors and vast infrastructures would do the task that they had been delegated. So here's my provocation for today. It is evident to me that as complex networks of actors and vast infrastructures are used for even simple tasks like displaying museum collections, things like that, like museum exhibitions, become more precarious. That is, technological breakdown becomes an increasing occurrence, almost a sure thing that is difficult to diagnose. So my question is, what might this mean for extended reality and the metaverse? How much precarity are we comfortable with? How might we diagnose where breakdowns occur? And how will we address the precariousness of a still increasing digital culture? So that's it for me. Happy to answer a few questions, but as you can see, I have more questions than answers today.
Yeah, I'm going to start by throwing it right back at you. How much parity are we comfortable with?
So that depends who you ask. I'm not very comfortable with it because I understand how precarious things are. It also depends on what we're talking about. Are we talking about a museum exhibit, a financial system, our personal data? What is it we're talking about? So it really depends on a lot of things.